Hi, welcome to our monthly broadcast. I'm your host, Natalia, and today we'll be covering 6 topics, including a Q&A session right at the end. So stay tuned all the way to the end if you've got any questions, and James and I can answer those for you.
So coming up next in our sort of highlight story of today's broadcast is going to be talking about the difference between the country of establishment and the country of incorporation in the United Kingdom, and these large changes that have been implemented by HMRC. And also we're going to be discussing how Amazon have implemented that through their platform and how it may have affected some of you. So we're going to be going into the depth about what's happened, why, and how to resolve that with myself and Hannah. That's coming up next.
We have Khalid talking about the low inventory fee that Amazon have just put into place. So please stay tuned to that to make sure that you're fully aware of what this is and how it affects you. And then after Khalid, I'll be speaking about cost, call of stock, and the pros and cons about the program, maybe things that you didn't know about it, just to make sure that you have the full terms and conditions before you make a choice.
We've recently had a lot of questions on our social media platforms regarding how to expand a US brand or US business across to the UK and Europe. So my colleague Connor is going to discuss and explain what things you need to consider and the benefits of doing them.
After the information on expanding into the UK and the EU, we have Ellie. If you watched our previous broadcast, Ellie was giving us some updates on EPR. Well, she's back with some more updates, but this time about Italy. So stay tuned to hear some information about the Italian EPR and how this is going to affect your Amazon and e-commerce sales.
Following the recent news of luxury brands Farfetch and Ted Baker, Laura will be discussing how to future-proof your e-commerce brand. Following that, we're going to be doing a live Q&A session where we're going to be answering all your questions, so make sure to get your questions in the chat right now.
If you do have questions during the broadcast, though, you can, of course, put them in the chat throughout the whole session, and then James and I can answer them at the end, or if it's urgent, one of our colleagues will be on the chat responding to you. So make sure that you join us today, and we'll be covering all these topics to inform you. Welcome to today's session, where we are going to be talking and discussing more about the difference between country of incorporation and country of establishment. I have my colleague James Farras here today, so we can discuss more about it. So let's just start, James. What is the main difference between country of incorporation and country of establishment?
Yeah, great question to sort of start off with, and it's something definitely we're sort of seeing in sort of the Amazon and e-commerce space in the UK as sort of a big news story at the moment. So the country of incorporation pertains to sort of where the legal formation of an entity actually occurred. Okay, so that could be in the United Kingdom where you've gone through the process with the local tax office to formate the business. The country of establishment actually refers more to where the operations of the business should actually run from. So such as things as where the decision-making function occurs, where employees are based, or even a physical office address. So it may not actually be the same as the country of incorporation. It can be 2 separate countries.
And why is it so important to prove the establishment for platforms such as Amazon?
Yeah, great question. So in terms of proving that to the likes of sort of, Amazon, there were large sort of changes within sort of the laws of how tax is sort of calculated and who takes on the responsibility to pay it back in 2021. And one of the things that sort of came across was that marketplaces or online marketplaces such as Amazon were required to collect and remit the VAT on sales for non-domiciled entities. And this actually extends further out to UK limiteds that are non-established, meaning Amazon is actually technically required to start collecting and remitting the 20% VAT on sales in the UK through their platform for non-resident, non-established UK companies.
What is HMRC's role in ensuring VAT compliance when it comes to country of establishment?
Yeah, sort of a great question. So as mentioned, the changes back in 2021 affected sort of the whole landscape and sort of how HMRC operates. And so they actually launched a brand new sort of team within the tax office to look after this, specifically for non-taxable, resident companies. So they are monitoring this very, very closely, and we have sort of seen examples of where Amazon necessarily has actually been informed by the tax office to suspend Amazon accounts due to sort of companies being non-established and not actually being VAT registered, or not actually completing the right filings that are required as a non-established company. So HMRC have been quite strict with this new team. They are focusing on actually ensuring that these laws that have come into effect are actually being adhered to.
Can you explain more about the reverse charge mechanism and how does it actually impact the country of establishment?
Yes, understanding sort of the reverse charge in that sort of situation can be quite complicated. So to give a quick brief definition and explanation of what it is, the reverse charge moves the VAT accounting responsibility away from the supplier across to the recipient. So this is commonly sort of done within sort of B2B transactions. You may be familiar with this as a similar sort of mechanism that's applied within Europe when it's a Europe to Europe B2B transaction. Now, the country of establishment can actually have an effect on whether that reverse charge actually applies on the sort of transaction. So it's worth reaching out to sort of a tax specialist just to clarify the implications of what the country of establishment would have on that transaction.
For everyone listening to us today, what sort of evidence can be provided to prove the country of establishment for VAT purposes?
Yeah, so it goes one of two ways. If you're looking to provide evidence to HMRC, but also Amazon, in respect to being established in the UK as a UK limited, one of the key things we've found here at Vast Accounting Business Consultants is providing payroll slips, showing that you actually have employees, as mentioned earlier in sort of the video, showing evidence that the establishment of the businesses in the UK. They will accept this and ensure that the country of establishment aligns with the country of incorporation. Now, if, however, you have a UK limited and the decision function of the business is occurring outside of the United Kingdom, then you're not necessarily in position to provide a payroll slip to HMRC or Amazon to provide and to prove to them that you're a company with the establishment in the UK, because technically and legally you're not. So in that situation, you would need to inform Amazon that you're non-established UK limited, meaning Amazon would then collect and remit the VAT on your sales in the UK.
How does the concept of taxable person or permanent establishment relate to VAT compliance?
Yeah, brilliant question. So UK limiteds typically in the UK benefit from a VAT threshold prior to VAT registration being required. So that threshold is based upon revenue. For many, many years, that was at £85,000. That's actually recently increased to £90,000 as of the 1st of April. And that does have a big implication on sort of the taxable presence and actually more in relation to the permanent establishment. So what the law now sort of dictates is that a UK limited with the establishment based in the United Kingdom, so once again, if they have their office in the UK, they have employees in the UK, and they have the decision function in the UK, will benefit from this VAT threshold prior to VAT registration being required in the United Kingdom. For UK limiteds who are non-resident or non-established in the United Kingdom, unfortunately, they do not benefit from this £90,000 VAT threshold revenue prior to VAT registration. So if you are a UK limited and you're selling on Amazon and you're not based as a director or shareholder in the United Kingdom and have no payroll, you will need to be registered for VAT from your first operation within the business in the United Kingdom. And once again, in relation to Amazon, they will expect a VAT number to be sort of uploaded into the back end. And once again, Amazon will then collect and remit the VAT on any of those transactions that occur on the platform.
Well, thank you for sharing that information. I think that is one of the main questions we receive. What kind of steps do sellers need to follow in order to ensure compliance, VAT compliance, when they're looking to sell in different countries across the EU?
So the steps businesses should take when sort of looking at expanding to other markets and understanding sort of VAT compliance and the different sort of implications of doing so, be it in the United Kingdom or sort of Europe, is understanding that a VAT registration is commonly required within sort of the United Kingdom or Europe, should you sort of, breach one of the three sort of requirements or liabilities. Now, they are importing into a country, physically storing in a country, or doing local B2C or B2B sales within that country. So if you can understand that concept of if you meet one of those three requirements, and typically e-commerce sellers and specifically on Amazon, they meet all three. If you can get your head around that rule, then obviously you can understand where the VAT registration is required, and obviously consequently the filing that is submitted to the tax office on a monthly, quarterly, or even annually basis.
Now, probably the question that everyone has been waiting for: what are the consequences of not being compliant with VAT related to establishment?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a thing that, I've dealt with over the last sort of several weeks, actually months, frequently. And I think the whole team has here at Avask. Now, the implications of not being compliant in this sort of new change and how Amazon's collecting and remitting is, firstly, what we've seen is Amazon have been suspending accounts and also stopping the disbursements of sort of funds from Amazon sellers specifically, which technically they're entitled to do to ensure that they've covered the VAT liability that they should have been collecting since 2021. So if sellers aren't being compliant to these new laws, then from Amazon's perspective, there's a high likelihood of you being suspended on your Amazon account, which is going to affect obviously the account health and obviously your revenue for that period. But also from a tax perspective and a tax office perspective, there are likely to be sort of penalties that might be applied, seeing as you've not actually been paying the VAT that you may have actually been collecting during your B2C sales within the United Kingdom as a non-established UK limited. So there are other sort of implications that can occur, but those two major points in terms of the penalties from Amazon, from the tax office, and blockages on sort of the Amazon Seller Central account are two of the major things we're sort of hearing and seeing at the moment.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for the time today, James. Thank you very much for answering the questions, and see you the next time.
Starting this month, there's been a new development with the introduction of the FBA low inventory cost coverage. What does that mean for you? If your products consistently maintain low inventory levels in relation to their sales, you'll be subject to this fee. The fees are already in effect, and Amazon is offering a transition period for the first month, which means that you will be charged this fee for the units shipped between the 1st and the 30th of April, and in May you will receive a credit back. From May onwards, this fee will be charged without a credit, and in order to avoid it, you need to ensure that either the long-term historical days of supply or the short-term historical days of supply are above 28 days.
Cost, call of stop, has been a great topic of conversation in the past months. It's been all over social media, and Amazon have really pushed some of the sellers to go on this program. I just wanted to touch up today on some of the things that maybe we don't talk about costs. So for example, the terms and conditions. There's some things that you should probably know before going on costs, and I just wanted to make you aware of these. So one of the things is that Amazon can change the criteria of the program at any point. They can change the retail price and your listings. Bear in mind, you provide Amazon with non-exclusive, royalty-free licenses for your products. So if you have a brand that you really want to keep to yourself and you don't want Amazon to change it or to make any changes to your listings, maybe this isn't the program for you. But there are loads of other programs that Amazon has that could be beneficial for you. So what I would recommend is speak to an advisor such as Avask or Amazon, see what program is best for you, and make the right choice, obviously taking into consideration all the factors.
Believe it or not, but only 2% of US brands ever try to sell within Europe. We keep getting loads of messages from US sellers that selling in the EU and UK market is too complicated. Europe is close to reaching the equivalent in US sales online, whilst offering 60% less competition. But did you know by taking these 4 steps, you could easily expand your business into the UK and EU marketplace? Firstly, ensure your products meet EU and UK regulations for safety, labeling, and packaging. Next, localization is key. Adapt your website, product description, and marketing material to resonate with your EU and UK customers. Register for VAT in the EU and UK. This means collecting VAT from your customers, ensuring your VAT filings, and VAT compliance within the tax authorities. Lastly, understanding customs procedures and import duties for goods when entering the EU and the UK by having proper documentation such as the customs declarations and invoices to ensure a smooth customs clearance. By following these practices, you'll set a solid foundation for expanding your e-commerce business into the EU and UK market. If you are from the US and you're interested in learning more about expansion into the EU and UK, please don't hesitate to get in contact today.
Italy is continuing to make strides in implementing extended producer responsibility measures to tackle environmental challenges. Recent developments have seen the government doubling down on efforts to hold producers accountable for the entire life cycle of their products. In line with EU directives, Italy has expanded the scope of EPR to cover a wider range of products, including electronics and packaging. This shift aims to reduce waste generation, promote recycling, and minimize the environmental footprint of products. New regulations are being introduced to incentivize producers to design products with sustainability in mind, encouraging the use of recyclable materials and eco-friendly production methods. Furthermore, collaboration between government agencies, industry stakeholders, and environmental organizations is strengthening enforcement mechanisms and ensuring compliance with EPR regulations. Marketplaces are yet to define exact dates for implementation, as authorities continue to set up processes for mass registration requirements. However, sellers should anticipate implementation and the requirement for registration in the near future. Whilst progress is being made, challenges such as enforcement gaps and funding constraints persist. However, Italy remains committed to advancing its EPR framework as part of broader efforts to build a more sustainable and circular economy.
Over the past few months, you may have noticed and seen in the news that e-commerce brands like Farfetch and Ted Baker have been struggling, even with the increase in the price of luxury goods that has gone up by 32% in the last 5 years. So how do you go about ensuring the sustainability of your brand when things aren't quite going your way? Here are some tips on how you can future-proof your e-commerce brand. So you can create sub-brands like Porsche have done by introducing more affordable models that don't compromise the expense and the luxury design of the classic models. And also Calvin Klein Jeans, which is brought in to offer more affordable options. Brands are also taking control of the resale and getting involved in the second-hand market of their goods. Often the resale price actually increases in comparison to the retail price. You can also have a look at the exclusivity of your products. A good example of this is the Hermes Birkin bag, which is not readily available to buy. It's low production, and so it makes it more in demand and is actually now considered an investment piece. Lastly, don't get carried away and expand too quickly. You need to make sure that you've got consistent and stable growth before you expand into a new market and ensure there's a gap for your product there as well.
Yep. Thank you guys for listening to sort of the key points we've spoken about within sort of the broadcast today. We just wanted to mention we actually have partnered recently with World First, who are actually the official sort of payment provider for the Euros 2024. So there's a QR code on screen which will allow you to scan and actually get the opportunity to win a pair of tickets to attend one of the matches, so long as you sign up to one of World First's services. So be sure to get a moment, get a picture, and scan the QR code on the screen.
Yeah, and it's so simple. All you have to do is sign up to World First, mention Avask. Either you're a client already or you maybe are interested in our services. All you have to do is mention Avask, and then you're in the draw and you could be at the Euros. I also wanted to mention that we have an event on the 28th of May in Madrid. This is an event between Avask Plus and Helium 10. So 2 great companies to have a listen. There's going to be loads of hosts talking about expansion, how to grow your Amazon seller platform, and just learn a bit more from other people. So if you're in Madrid on the 20th of May, definitely pop over. We're going to put the QR code right there on screen so you can scan and join us there.
Perfect. So, this is a great opportunity for you guys to sort of put some questions in the chat that may have arisen from the sort of broadcast today, be it, let's say, on the EPR with regards to Italy, the establishment status, or any other sort of the topics that we've gone through with you today. We'll give it a couple quick moments for you guys to write some questions in the chat, and then we'll be happy to sort of answer them live. If there are any questions we can't answer live, then of course we'll be more than happy sort of for you to reach out to us, or for us to sort of come back to you and sort of answer them offline. So we'll just give a few moments for you guys to,
there's been so many topics. So about any of the topics that we've discussed today, I know cost is a topic of interest right now, and there's been some rumors around whether it's going to stay or if it's going to go. So if you have any questions on that, let us know. And obviously all the changes coming up in the UK, I think we have a question on that one. So we'll go on that one in a second. But there's EPR, there's expansion from the US to Europe. Do you have any questions on when to do that, how to do that? Let us know. Obviously, you can just pop it on the chat.
Exactly. I think we're just going to go ahead with that first question,
perfect.
and that's sort of within the chat from Mariana. So it's more specifically related to sort of what I mentioned within sort of the broadcast, talking about the establishment status and how that may actually affect you as a non-established UK business selling globally. Now, fortunately, there aren't major implications of something like this actually happening. So if you're a non-established UK entity selling, let's say, in Europe or Japan or even the US, Amazon will naturally collect and remit the VAT on your sales or sales tax. So there's not a huge implication outside the UK market with this sort of new ruling. So it's only really important, if you actually are selling in the UK, to be aware of what these changes are and actually how to navigate them with Amazon directly. I think there are a few more questions.
We got another one. What countries now, other than Germany, currently require EPR? There's actually a lot of countries that have EPR, but it's going to depend on where you sell. So if you sell on Amazon, you have several options. Germany does ask you to have an EPR registration, so you're always going to need it. But Amazon do offer, just like you were saying about collecting and remitting, Amazon do offer some assistance. It's called Pay on Behalf for almost all the other countries. But EPR actually exists in a lot of countries. So if you reach out and let us know what categories you're selling and which countries you're selling on, you might have to have France, Spain, Austria, and of course, Germany.
Exactly. Just to follow up on specifically that point, that the 4 countries of Germany, France, Spain, and sort of Austria actually have sort of an online marketplace sort of requirement in play that you have to be wary of. So there are actually sort of introductions of EPR in other markets, such as sort of as mentioned today with Italy, and actually Sweden's joining and the United Kingdom's joining in 2025. So just be wary that the requirements within Amazon are one thing, and then the requirements of Amazon or with other marketplaces or selling through your own marketplace actually are slightly different. So as Natalia mentioned, it might be best just to reach out to us, let us know what your categories are, and then we'll be more than happy to sort of elaborate on those. Now I see a few more questions coming in, so we'll have a look at this one together and see how we can answer it.
So it says, you talked about expanding from the US to the UK and EU markets. What about the other way around? What do we need to take into account for US market? Great question. Obviously, it's a completely different world. They don't have VAT. They actually have sales tax. But luckily, Amazon does work in a very similar manner that they collect and remit the sales tax for you. So it's going to depend, again, if you sell on Amazon or if you sell on your own website, there's going to be different requirements. But the first thing is the EIN number. That's the first number that you're going to need to be able to set up your Amazon seller account and start selling.
Yeah, I think the second thing just to be wary of, slightly away from the compliance side with an expansion from, let's say, Europe or the UK across to the United Kingdom, to the US, is the US is a completely different beast. It's huge, it's very competitive, and you need to ensure you actually have the cash flow to fund not only the stock that's going there, but also in terms of the marketing. So it's one thing getting compliant with the sales tax numbers and the EIN number, but you need to be wary. It's a highly competitive marketplace, and you need to be sort of in a financial positive cash flow sort of position to be able to do that expansion. So I think there's actually a second question on the US to Europe, or one of the two, on the expansion US to Europe, the other way around, apologies, with regards to the customs here. So on the expansion to US to Europe, is there an inexpensive way to have indirect representation of import goods? Very good question. Unfortunately, as sort of a business that's not domiciled within the area of import, you will always require the indirect representation. The one thing I could recommend and tip I can sort of give is if you're able to sort of combine your logistics and the customs clearance, so the indirect representation together, what we've seen very often is that it actually makes the whole package a lot cheaper. Because almost, a provider is providing you two services in terms of the transport and the customs clearance, they can reduce their margin slightly, making it easier for you to be able to sort of cost effectively import into Europe.
Yeah, and I guess not only cost-wise, it's just so much more simple. If that person is doing the freight forwarding and the clearance, they just have visibility over everything. And the chances of things going wrong is much slimmer, especially with these things. You don't want your products to get stuck at customs. So yeah, definitely suggest that.
Definitely. So we have a question here on call of stock. So obviously COS now, obviously Natalia, you mentioned that within sort of the broadcast. So I'm going to let you sort of go into the depths and the details of this. So over to you.
Thank you. If we recommend it, that's a difficult question because obviously it's going to depend on your situation, what it is that you want to do. But what I was touching up on is that the cost program is very specific to people that maybe aren't so focused on their brand, only because Amazon have control over your brand in a way, so they can change the listings and they can change the pricing. So if you're really focused on your brand, it might not be the best one for you. I know obviously it just requires one VAT number, but taking that extra step and potentially getting 2 VAT numbers can open up Pan-EU for you, and that might be a better choice. There are rumors right now that costs might not be there in the future, so maybe Pan-EU would be the best choice for you.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, I think in terms of starting on FBA Amazon, it's always important not necessarily to try achieving a blanket strategy of expansion going into 6-7 different marketplaces. Focus in on specific markets. So although cost allows sort of that expansion across 6 different marketplaces in one, it might actually make sense just to focus on 1 or 2 locally with the VAT numbers instead of using such a program. So it doesn't actually target your buyers.
Yeah, get it right in those core countries that you're really, really focused on. And then you can expand into the other ones. So yeah, definitely. Great point.
Perfect. We're just going to check the chat to see if there are any other sort of questions left to sort of answer.
A lot about football is in there. Lots to get into the draw.
So there's a few bits of information obviously on the Helium 10 Avask event.
Yes, 28th of May, so definitely be there. You've got the link on the chat and on the screen, so you can definitely join that. I think it's going to be great. There's so many hosts coming.
Definitely. I actually attended the one we did in Frankfurt a couple of months ago with Helium 10, and I even learned some things in terms of marketing strategies and actually how to implement sort of certain PPC strategies. So it's sort of relevant for any seller, from the smaller ones, the ones to sort of expanding to different marketplaces at the same time. I think we just have had one last question from Susan again. So how can I find out more information about the details of COS and the become eligible? Do you think COS is a good way to start before Pan-EU?
So if you're eligible or not, that will be on your Seller Central account. You will be able to see if your ASINs are eligible. This depends completely on Amazon again. So that's why we don't have much control over it, whereas with Pan-EU, you have full control over it. You can say, okay, I want 6 countries, or I just want 2. So is it a good way to start before Pan-EU? It could be, because you could always disenable it, so you could try it out and then switch over to Pan-EU. But I think if I would have to pick, I would personally pick Pan-EU. Just as James was saying, you can fully have control over that market that you're trying to expand into. Use that knowledge that you've learned from events, from Madrid, from everywhere that you picked up all this knowledge on. Focus on that market, make it the best market that you can, and then start expanding into the other ones. And you have full control. So if it was my brand, I would like to have full control. But if you just want to test out the waters, COS is definitely a good option to just get that one VAT number, see how it goes, see what market engages the most with your product, and then you could take the next step and go into other markets.
Perfect. It's good to know. I think there's just another question with regards to EPR, which I think I'll be able to answer within this. Now, the liability behind EPR is pretty much applicable when you bring a product onto a market. So what do I mean by bringing it onto a market? It means actually selling it to an end consumer. Okay, so that is regardless if it's a local sale within, let's say, Germany, or a cross-border sale from Germany to France, or even to the extent of sort of the question, that's been raised is even if it comes from outside the European Union into the European Union, if the end consumer is based in one of those 4 countries we mentioned, then there is the requirement and liability for you to be registered for EPR and actually pay a small eco contribution based upon sort of the weight of the product that you've actually sold. So the quick answer is yes, even with drop shipping, you do need to be EPR compliant.
Perfect. I don't think we have any questions left, but we do still have some time. So if you still have some questions, pop them onto the chat and obviously we can help.
Yeah, and once again, we're just going to mention, obviously we mentioned Helium 10, the event in Madrid on the 28th of May. Apologies. But also with regards to, the other mentions about the tickets that obviously World First are sort of promoting as they're sort of the official payment provider for the UEFA Euros, which are coming up, which is quite exciting if you're a fan of football. So, be sure to scan the QR code, reach out to them, look at their services. What we do see when it comes to sort of selling cross-border, obviously you deal with many different currencies, and these currency fluctuations can actually affect a business massively. So it's best to sort of store, current currencies across regions, and obviously in different currencies. So.
Yeah, and especially with tax as well. Some of you might have tax to reclaim, and a lot of it is in checks and even local currencies, and they will only pay you this tax back if you have the local currencies. So World First is the best option to do this and obviously get this money back so that you can use it on other things. And it's a bonus if you get 2 tickets for the Euros, isn't it?
Exactly. So I think that is pretty much all the questions we've had for today. So I hope you've actually learned something from the podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you sort of next month.
Thank you.